this will be the objectives for our lecture this morning. We will try to identify and differentiate the different types of hypersensitivity reactions. We will review the immunologic basis of hypersensitivity reactions. We will recognize clinical examples, particularly adverse drug reactions. We will apply immunologic basic knowledge to various types of adverse drug reactions, and we will also, of course, discuss management of the various types of the drug reactions. So let's start with an overview of hypersensitivity reactions. What are hypersensitivity reactions? Now, hypersensitivity reactions are injurious or pathologic immune reactions upon exposure to a defined stimulus at a dose that is tolerated by normal individuals. So is it the one and the same as allergy? Well, allergy is a type of hypersensitivity reaction that is initiated by specific immunologic mechanisms involving either an antibody-mediated or a cell-mediated mechanism to produce specific disease manifestations. They are usually reproducible and they are specific to an allergenic substance or what we call an allergen. So basically, no, all allergies are hypersensitivity reactions. But when you talk about hypersensitivity reactions, it doesn't automatically mean that you're talking about allergies. Why is that? I think this classification will best explain my last statement. No? So, hypersensitivity reactions may occur against foreign antigens or against self-antigens. It is classified based on the principal immunologic mechanisms causing the disease. So the easiest way to discuss the pathophysiology of allergic disease or hypersensitivity reactions rather is by going through the Gell and Coombs classification. So for many years, it has been the Gell and Coombs classification has been a widely accepted guide to understanding the complexities of immunologic reactions, whether they are infectious in origin or they are adverse reactions to vaccines, they are allergic diseases, or they are autoimmune diseases. They all fall into these categories. Originally, there were just 4 types of hypersensitivity reactions. These are your type 1, type 2, type 3, and type 4. Your type 1 is your immediate hypersensitivity reaction. Your type 2 is your anti-mediated disease. Type 3 is your immune complex-mediated disease. And then your type 4 is your delayed type of hypersensitivity reactions. At present, there is already a subcategory or subclassification for your type 4. Meron na rin siyang type 4A, B, C, and D. And I will show that to you later. No? Let's look into these different types of hypersensitivity reactions one by one. And let's begin with the most common one or the one that you are probably most familiar with, especially when we talk about hypersensitivity reactions. Ito yung una-una nating naisip. Pag sinabing hypersensitivity reactions, more often than not, ang naisip natin is the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. So the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction, as I mentioned, is an immediate reaction and it is IgE mediated. The hallmark of allergic diseases actually is the production of your IgE antibody, which is dependent on the activation of your IL-4 producing helper T cells. The development of allergies is the result of complex and poorly understood gene-environment interactions. So there is a genetic predisposition in the development of allergies, mana-mana talaga siya. And at the same time, there are also various environmental factors such as your exposure to allergens and microbes, which also influences the propensity to develop allergies. In the past few years, the concept of the fact that it is already being entertained that genes are somehow being altered because of environmental exposures. That is why there are already patients who have no family histories of allergic disease but eventually develop these disorders, no? So sometimes in the absence of allergic diseases, meron pa ring family history of allergic diseases, meron pa ring nagde-develop na allergies. Atopic individuals would usually have highly responsive IL-4 producing T cells to common environmental allergens that do not otherwise cause any reactions to normal individuals. Kaya natin laging sinasabi there is somehow a certain predisposition for these individuals. The typical manifestations of allergies would usually include vascular and smooth muscle reactions that develops rapidly after repeated exposure to the allergen. These reactions are caused by mast cell activation, which is initiated by your IgE. The target organs that are most commonly involved in type 1 injury include your respiratory system, the GIT, the skin, and may even be systemic in presentation. Manifestations may vary from skin rashes to sinus congestion, rhinorrhea, nasal itching, bronchial constriction as in asthma, abdominal pains, diarrhea, and systemic shock as in anaphylaxis. Now, aside from IgE, you also have other antibodies that are also capable of causing diseases, and they do so by binding to their target antigens or tissues. If type 1 involves IgE, your type 2 or your antibody-mediated disease will now involve your IgG, IgM, and to a lesser extent, your IgA. These antibodies that are supposed to be our defense towards foreign antigens sometimes end up targeting our own cells or tissues. They are directed to cell surface antigens on specific cells like your erythrocytes, your neutrophils, your platelets, and some epithelial cells of your glandular or mucosal surfaces, or on antigens on tissues. These antigens that are found on the cells may be autoantibodies against self. They may be intracellular infectious agents. They may be neoantigens that result from infections, neoplasia, or chemical carcinogens, or they can be cell surface molecules from chemicals or extracellular microbes. This type of reaction causes tissue damage via three mechanisms. No? The first one is when antibodies bind to the surface of the cell. It turns the cell to a target for elimination. Diba? Kasi yun naman yung purpose ng antibodies. Diba? Normally, as it acts to be one of our defense mechanisms, it usually will look for an antigen, imamark niya yung antigen na yon para yung mga cells that are responsible, effector cells that are responsible for killing that particular antigen, will be able to find them and kill them, eliminate them. Pero sometimes what happens is that these antibodies actually bind to cells that are not foreign. And then cell death occurs because since they are flagged already, they are targeted, they are already marked by your antibodies, cell death occurs because of complement activations. All of these mechanisms that causes cell death now occurs. This includes your complement activation, opsonization, extracellular release of your reactive oxygen species or your ROS, or an anti-dependent body cellular cytotoxicity reaction. Second, aside from making cells targets for elimination, antibodies can also block the cell from doing its job through what we call cellular neutralization. Cellular neutralization is when there is an antagonistic interaction between an antibody and a normal cell. So very good example of this will be your myasthenia gravis, right? Diba? In MG or myasthenia gravis, the antibodies, they block the acetylcholine receptors at the neuromuscular junction. Thus, it prevents muscular contraction. And then it will end up causing weakness and fatigue. No? So hindi na napaperform yung function. And then finally, you have cellular stimulation, which is caused by an enhanced effect of an autoantibody towards a normal cell. So technically, what I'm saying here is there is overstimulation of the receptor. This usually leads to an overproduction of a cell product like that which is seen in, for example, Graves' disease. Diba? So this Graves' disease, the antibodies stimulate your TSH receptors on thyroid cells, which causes them to produce excessive thyroid hormones. No? So in short, in type 2 hypersensitivity reactions, antibodies lead to the killing of the cells, cell paralysis, or they paralyze their function, or they push them into dangerous overactivities, overstimulation. These are other examples of diseases that are caused by type 2 hypersensitivity reaction or antibody-mediated disease. So you have your autoimmune hemolytic anemia, wherein the target antigen are actually your RBC membrane proteins. The mechanisms involved is cell death, phagocytosis, leading to symptoms like hemolysis and anemia. You also have Goodpasture syndrome, wherein the target antigen is the basement membrane of your kidney glomeruli and your lung alveoli. The mechanism involved here is inflammation, semi-overstimulation, and I think it's primarily overstimulation. Manifestation leads to nephritis and lung hemorrhage. You have Graves' disease and myasthenia gravis, which I already discussed earlier. And then you also have rheumatic fever, wherein the target antigen is your strep cell wall antigen, which cross-reacts with your myocardial antigen. It causes inflammation and leads to myocarditis and arthritis. Now, in contrast to your type 2 reactions, where antibodies bind directly to antigens on cell surfaces, type 3 hypersensitivity reactions involves antibodies binding to soluble antigens in the blood or tissues, forming what we call immune complexes. So, normally, immune complexes are actually harmless. It's another way of defending the body. No? They're part of the body's way of neutralizing and eliminating foreign antigens. No? However, it starts to become pathologic once there's too much antigen relative to the antibody, because this will lead to the formation of small or medium-sized complexes that are less soluble and are harder for phagocytes or phagocytic cells to clear. These immune complexes tend to get trapped in places where blood plasma is filtered under high pressure, like your kidneys, your joints, the small vessels in your skin, and other organs. Once they are lodged in these vessel walls, these complexes will now trigger the complement cascade, and complement components like your C3A and your C5A will increase vascular permeability and will start recruiting neutrophils. The neutrophils will now try to destroy the quote-unquote foreign complexes, release enzymes and ROS, damaging nearby healthy tissue. So the end result is inflammation and tissue injury. Patients will now present with joint pains, proteinuria, skin rashes, or systemic symptoms depending on the site of immune complex deposition. So again, these are examples of immune complex mediated diseases. So you have your SLE, wherein your antibodies specifically target DNA, nuclear components like your DNA, your nuclear proteins, and other nuclear antigens. Now, these antibodies will bind to these antigens, they will form immune complexes, and then they will circulate and deposit in various organs. Once they deposit, it will lead to nephritis, arthritis, vasculitis. Post-strep GN, so after a streptococcal infection, no, the antibodies that are formed because of the streptococci, no, or those that are against your streptococcal cell wall, will bind with these antigens. They will lead into the formation of immune complexes. They will get trapped into your glomeruli of the kidneys, causing nephritis. You also have serum sickness, basically same pathophysiologic mechanism. They occur after a foreign serum is administered, like an antitoxin, an animal-derived antitoxin, or certain drugs. Now, the antibodies will form complexes and deposit in various organs again, causing systemic vasculitis, nephritis, arthritis. And then lastly, you have your polyarthritis nodosa, wherein it is associated with chronic infections, where again antibodies form against these microbial antigens. Now, these immune complexes will again deposit in your medium-sized arteries, triggering vasculitis. And lastly, you have your type 4 or your delayed type of hypersensitivity reaction. So this type of hypersensitivity reaction, unlike the previous three, does not involve antibodies, right? But it is rather a reaction that results from the activation of your T cells or your T lymphocytes against self-antigens in autoimmune diseases and exaggerated or persistent responses to environmental antigens, such as those that you see in contact dermatitis. So in different T-cell mediated diseases, tissue injury is caused by inflammation induced by your cytokines that are produced by your CD4 T cells. Or they can also be caused by the killing of your cells as a product of your cytotoxicity or cytokiller cells of your CD8 cells. Because T cells need time to recognize the antigen, activate and recruit their effector cells, this response is not immediate. No? Remember your basics, diba? Your T cells and your B cells are part of your adaptive immune response, which actually take longer to act as compared to your innate immune system, right? So it is called delayed hypersensitivity reaction precisely because the reaction typically appears 24 to 48 hours after re-exposure in a previously sensitized individual. Unlike your type 1, wherein the reaction or the manifestation occurs minutes, seconds even after the exposure, in DTH, the reaction occurs far from the time wherein the individual was exposed to the allergen. So it appears 24 to 48 hours. The delay is the time needed for your antigen-specific T cells to kind of home to the site, become activated, and develop or cause inflammatory response. So the very classic example of your type 4 hypersensitivity reaction is your tuberculin skin test. So if someone has been previously exposed to MTB, Mycobacterium tuberculosis antigens, injecting your PPD or your purified protein derivative under the skin will trigger a reaction, an induration after about 48 hours. No? So this is the hallmark of a DTH response. These are other examples of your type 4 hypersensitivity reactions. You have your multiple sclerosis, wherein your CD4 T cells target myelin proteins in your CNS. They release cytokines that activate macrophages and microglia, causing demyelination and impaired nerve conduction. This will then lead to weakness, sensory loss, and coordination problems. You have your RA, wherein your autoreactive CT4 T cells in the synovium release cytokines that recruit inflammatory cells, leading to cartilage and bone erosion. Chronic inflammation will now produce joint pains, swelling, and deformity. In type 1 diabetes mellitus, your CD8 T cells, your cytotoxic T cells, destroy your insulin-producing pancreatic beta cells, which will lead to insulin deficiency and hyperglycemia. Long-term, this will cause microvascular and macrovascular complications. No? And then finally, your viral hepatitis, again, the cell responsible here is your CD8 T cells also. They will kill your hepatocytes, displaying viral peptides, helping control infection, but at the same time, they also cause liver injury. Now, persistent inflammation will now promote fibrosis and cirrhosis. Now, after a very brief introduction on hypersensitivity reactions, we'll proceed to the second topic that was assigned to me, which is your adverse drug reactions. What is adverse drug reaction? An adverse drug reaction, as defined by the World Health Organization, is any noxious, unintended, and undesired effect of a drug that occurs at doses used for prevention, diagnosis, or treatment. It is, in essence, an umbrella term for all possible types of reaction that may occur upon drug intake. There are two classifications for drug reactions. You have your type A, your predictable reactions, and your type B, which is your unpredictable reactions. Predictable reactions or your type A reactions are usually dose dependent. They are related to the known pharmacologic actions of the drug. And although they may be related to the underlying genetic and ecologic variability, they may occur in otherwise normal individuals. So in any type of individual, pwedeng magkaroon ng type A reaction. Predictable reactions account for about 80% of all adverse drug reactions. So it's still the most common type of adverse drug reaction. Type B reactions are less directly related to those. They are unrelated to the pharmacologic actions of the drug, and they only occur in susceptible individuals. These are some examples of your predictable reactions. You have drug overdose, like what you see in bleeding with warfarin overdose, or hypoglycemia with very high levels of insulin, or respiratory depression with opioids. You have side effects like what you see when you have diarrhea or gastric upset upon antibiotic intake, abdominal pains after steroids, or sedation with certain antihistamines, right? You also have your secondary effects like colitis with after intake of certain antibiotics, for example, your clindamycin. And then you have your drug interactions. For example, the use of macrolides with theophylline. Macrolides will tend to prolong the effect of theophylline. You have also rifampicin and oral contraceptive pills, wherein there is a possibility of decreased contraceptive effectiveness when you take rifampicin. Now, on the other side of the table are examples of your type B hypersensitivity reactions or your unpredictable reactions. You have here your drug intolerance, which is the undesirable pharmacologic effect that occurs at low and sometimes subtherapeutic doses of the drug without underlying abnormalities of metabolism, excretion, or bioavailability of the drug. So example of this would be when you have tinnitus when you take salicylates. You also have idiosyncratic reactions, which are qualitatively abnormal, unexpected response to a drug differing from its pharmacologic action. For example, when you have anemia in G6PD patients, diba? If you give G6PD patients, let's say for example, Primaquine, they may develop hemolytic anemia. And then, of course, lastly, you have your drug allergy, which is your immunologically mediated responses. They can include both allergic, non-allergic, or pseudo-allergic reactions, which may result from what we call direct mast cell activation or releasers. No? The focus, of course, for our discussion in this morning will be your drug allergy. So drug allergy refers to objectively reproducible symptoms or signs initiated by exposure to a drug at a dose that is normally tolerated by hypersensitive individuals. It is a type of unpredictable adverse drug reaction and includes reactions induced by immune or inflammatory cells as well as other non-immunological mechanisms. In terms of pathogenesis, there are immunologic and non-immunologic pathways in the development of adverse drug reactions. Non-immunologic reactions do not involve the adaptive immune response and has therefore no memory of the reaction, and the ability to reproduce them on subsequent exposure to the drug are inconsistent. These non-allergic reactions are associated with a variety of pharmacologic mechanisms, and in the past it was termed as either pseudo-allergic or anaphylactoid reactions. So examples of these are your direct mast cell releasers like your opioids, your taxanes, your radiocontrast medias, and your aspirin-exacerbated respiratory disease. Again, this table is a summary of what I've discussed earlier when I was giving an overview of hypersensitivity reactions. And again, it's still, in my opinion, is the best and most concise way of explaining and understanding the immunopathogenesis of allergic reactions. So here you can see your type 1, IgG mediated, your type 2, IgE ang type 1, type 2 and type 3 are your IgG mediated. And this is what I was talking to you about, yung type 4, A, B, C, D. But in general, they're all T cell. T cell, the effector cells here, or the cells that causes the problem, are still your T cells. No? So this is the immunologic pathogenesis of drug reactions as well. Most of them will fall in type 1 and type 4 hypersensitivity reactions. Adverse drug reactions in terms of epidemiology have been reported to affect 10 to 20% of hospitalized patients and up to 25% of outpatients. Type A reactions, as I've mentioned earlier, are more common than your type B reactions, with type B reactions occurring with an estimated frequency of around 10 to 15% of all adverse drug reactions. 6 to 10% of adverse drug reactions are immune-related. And the most common implicated drug groups causing allergic reactions are your beta-lactam antibiotics and your NSAIDs. Other common causes are radiocontrast media, your neuromuscular blocking agents, anesthetics, and anti-epileptic drugs. Increasingly, reports have been published on hypersensitivity reactions to anti-cancer drugs, such as your platines and your taxanes, and to biologic cytokines and anti-cytokines. But I would also like to tell you that adverse drug reactions can occur in all types of medications, even those that we feel like are seemingly safe. No? So usually ako, when I receive patients who have adverse drug reactions, I really screen through everything, including the vitamins and the supplements and those drugs that are being bought wherever. No, so yung mga ganyan, kasama sila sa possible likelihood of causing or triggering a reaction. Most common clinical presentation are still cutaneous reactions, such as your maculopapular eruptions, your urticaria. And drug reactions may also be severe and potentially life-threatening. Examples of these would include your SJS, your Stevens-Johnson syndrome, your toxic epidermal necrolysis, or your TEN, your drug-induced hypersensitivity reactions, or your DIHS, and your immune hepatitis. So what are the clinical presentations of adverse drug reactions? First, you have your maculopapular rash. Maculopapular rashes are morbilliform or maculopapular eruptions. These are your most common drug-induced manifestations of drug-induced reactions. So as the name implies, it consists of blanching, symmetric and confluent macules and papules. It is important to be able to identify that the rashes are blanching, because a rash that doesn't blanch may pertain to a more serious infection. These types of rash would usually start on the trunk or intertriginous areas and would rarely involve the face. When there is extensive facial involvement, especially if there is edema, DIHS, or your drug-induced hypersensitivity syndrome, which is a more severe type of reaction, may already be considered. This type of reaction may be associated with moderate to severe pruritus and fever. Thus, a viral exanthem is a common differential diagnosis, especially in children. So a thorough history looking into other symptoms, such as the presence or the absence of enanthems, other respiratory tract infections like your cough, colds, and coryza, and polymorphisms of the skin lesions will aid in the diagnosis. Actually, if you look at the picture right now, diba, maybe if you didn't know we were talking about hypersensitivity reactions, the first thing you would think about in this picture would probably be measles, no? And what will differentiate it from a drug reaction is the history of your patient. So that being said, the diagnosis of a drug reaction manifesting as an MP rash is mainly clinical, and it rarely needs laboratory testing or skin biopsy. The common offenders of maculopapular rashes include aminopenicillins, cephalosporins, antibacterial sulfonamides, allopurinol, and anti-epileptic drugs. However, any drug again can cause a morbilliform exanthem. Certain medications carry very high rates of morbilliform eruption, including your nevirapine and your lamotrigine. Maculopapular reactions usually develop within 1 week of initiation of therapy and last less than 2 weeks. Occasionally, these eruptions resolve despite continued use of responsible drug. However, the possibility of worsening symptoms is also highly likely. Hence, the suspected drug is usually discontinued unless it is really essential. It is important to know that the rash may continue to progress for a few weeks up to 1 week following medication discontinuation. Because some patients would say, Doc, isang linggo ko nang hindi tinainom yung gamot, bakit meron pa rin? Because it's really possible for a reaction to continue occurring even despite discontinuation of the medications. Oral antihistamines and emollients may help relieve pruritus. A short course of potent topical glucocorticoids can also reduce inflammation and symptoms. Systemic glucocorticoid treatment is rarely indicated for these patients. Next manifestation is your urticaria, angioedema, and anaphylaxis. Urticaria is the second most frequent type of cutaneous reaction to drugs. It is characterized by a pruritic red wheal of varying size, rarely lasting more than 24 hours. Angioedema involves edema of the deeper layer of the skin and subcutaneous tissues. Urticaria and angioedema may be part of a sudden onset life-threatening reaction known as your anaphylaxis. It is frequently associated with ACE inhibitors, aspirin, NSAIDs, penicillin, and blood products. But similar to maculopapular rashes, it may also be observed in all drugs. However, medications account for no more than 10 to 20% of acute urticarial cases. So when you see urticaria in patients, majority of these cases aren't actually triggered by drug reactions. Only 10 to 20% of them are triggered by adverse drug reactions. So you'll have to open up your differentials when you see urticarial lesions. This may also involve respiratory and gastrointestinal system and even your mucous membranes. Drug-induced urticaria may be caused by 3 mechanisms. The first one is an IgE-dependent mechanism, your type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. We mentioned earlier that because type 1 is an immediate type, we expect reactions to occur within minutes to at least 3 to 6 hours after exposure. Second mechanism is circulating immune complexes, or your serum sickness, which is a type 3 reaction, right? These reactions take a bit longer to manifest, and symptoms will usually be observed within 6 to 12 days after first exposure. In these types of reaction, urticaria may be accompanied by fever, hematuria, arthralgias, hepatic dysfunction, and neurologic symptoms. And finally, you have your non-immunologic activation of effector pathways. So certain drugs like your NSAIDs, your ACE inhibitors, your angiotensin II antagonists, and your radiocontrast media dyes may induce urticarial lesions, angioedema, and anaphylaxis in the absence of drug-specific antibodies through direct mast cell degranulation. Remember, if you go back to your basics, diba, your mast cells are the cells that contain your histamine, which actually is the one responsible for the development of symptoms that are related to allergic diseases. So these drugs, NSAIDs, ACE, opioids, radiocontrast medias, they actually trigger your mast cells. They cause degranulation of your mast cells even in the absence of antibodies. The treatment of urticaria or angioedema depends on the severity of the reaction. In severe cases like anaphylaxis, which involves your respiratory or cardiovascular compromise, epinephrine is the drug of choice, and IV corticosteroids, Epinephrine is the drug of choice at the dose specified here, which is 1:1,000, 0.3 to 0.5 milligrams intramuscularly at the anterolateral thigh. Intravenous glucocorticoids and antihistamines are just adjunctive treatment. For patients with urticaria and angioedema, antihistamines and drug withdrawal is the drug of choice in its management. For all cases, anaphylaxis, urticaria, and angioedema, drug withdrawal is very important, and future drug avoidance is recommended. Sometimes rechallenge or reintroducing the drug may be necessary, especially if the reaction is not very severe. The third manifestation is your fixed drug eruption. Your FDE is not as common as the two previously mentioned presentations. It is characterized by one or more sharply demarcated dull red to brown lesions, sometimes with central dusky violaceous erythema and central bullae, as you can see in the picture right here. Para siyang coin, bilog na bilog, perfectly circled talaga yung lesions ng fixed drug eruption. After the acute inflammation, hyperpigmentation may occur. And what is interesting in this type of reaction is that with rechallenge, the reaction is noted to occur in the same location, kaya siya tinatawag na fixed drug eruption, but may spread to new areas as well. So for example, your patient nag-FDE, nag-resolve na, nag-manifest ganito or ganito initially, and then it resolved when you introduce the drug, same areas, exactly the same areas are affected. Some new areas may also occur. Lesions often involve the lips, the hands, the legs, the face, the genitalia, and the oral mucosa. It may also cause a burning sensation. Most patients have multiple lesions. Fixed drug eruptions have been associated with pseudoephedrine, frequently a non-pigmenting reaction, phenolphthalein in laxatives, sulfonamides, tetracyclines, NSAIDs, barbiturates, and other drugs. Now, drug-induced hypersensitivity reactions, or your DIHS. This is a systemic drug reaction that was previously known as DRESS, or your drug reaction with eosinophilia and systemic symptoms. However, since eosinophilia is not always present in these cases, the term DIHS was coined and is now the preferred term. Clinically, DIHS presents with a prodrome of fever and flu-like symptoms. It is followed by the appearance of a diffuse morbilliform eruption, usually involving the face. Diba? I've mentioned earlier kanina when we were discussing MP rash. Pag MP rash, usually trunk extremities lang involved. But if you start to have lesions on the face, especially if it involves facial edema, then you might want to consider already a more severe reaction, which is a drug-induced hypersensitivity reaction. So not just the face, the hands and the feet are also swollen. Cutaneous reactions would usually begin 2 to 8 weeks after the drug is started and persists after drug cessation. So if it starts 2 to 8 weeks after a drug is started, then this probably is a type 4 hypersensitivity reaction, right? The signs and symptoms will continue for several weeks, especially those with associated hepatitis. This is more severe because there is already systemic manifestations. There is already systemic involvement. Other organs are already involved, unlike your MP rash a while ago, wherein lesions are just limited to the skin. So systemic manifestations include lymphadenopathies, fever, leukocytosis, often with eosinophilia or atypical lymphocytes, and other organ involvements like hepatitis, nephritis, pneumonitis, myositis, and gastroenteritis. Amongst these organs, it is the liver that is most frequently involved. So these are some pictures of a patient with DIHS. Here again, you can see a diffuse morbilliform eruption in the lower extremities. Diba kamukhang kamukha ng MP rash kanina? But the difference is, here, the face is now involved. Swollen, may konting desquamation around the perioral area. Maybe not very clear in the picture, but this is also diffuse erythema. There is diffuse erythema of the face. DIHS have distinct patterns of timing of onset and organ involvement in certain drugs. For example, allopurinol will classically induce DIHS with renal involvement, cardiac, and lung involvement. Sorry. Where was I? Sorry. Wait lang. Can I hold for a while? I need to. Sorry about that. Where was I? So there, you have distinct patterns of manifestations, timing of onset, organ involvement. So allopurinol, usually renal yan. I'm really sorry. I really have to take this call. Sorry. Okay, sorry. There. So GI involvement is usually seen in abacavir. So yeah, may certain patterns. So it's usually pag nakikita na namin na okay, mukhang ito yung implicated drug for this type of hypersensitivity reaction, then we know which organ to focus on because usually nga may associated na silang organ involvement. The eruption commonly recurs with rechallenge and cross reactions, especially among aromatic anticonvulsants, including your phenytoin, carbamazepine, and phenobarbital. Recent researches suggest that inciting drugs may reactivate quiescent human HHV, human herpes virus, and CMV or cytomegalovirus. This is associated with worse prognosis because the viral reactivation results in viral-specific CD8 T lymphocytes, which will subsequently lead to organ damage. The mortality rates in DIHS are as high as 10%, with most fatalities resulting from liver failure. In all cases, immediate withdrawal of the suspected culprit drug is required. Systemic glucocorticoids at 1.5 to 2 mkd, milligram per kilogram per day, prednisone equivalent, should be started and tapered slowly over 8 to 12 weeks. During this time of tapering, clinical symptoms in laboratories must be serially conducted. This includes your complete blood count, your CBC with differentials, a basic metabolic panel, and of course, your liver function test. In cases wherein there is rapid recurrence upon tapering of steroids, whether they be symptoms or laboratory abnormalities, a steroid-sparing agent like your mycophenolate mofetil, your IVIG, or your cyclosporin may be indicated. The resolution and the complication of other organ involvements must also be monitored. Now, given the severe long-term complications of myocarditis, patients should undergo cardiac evaluations in cases of severe DIHS or if heart involvement is suspected due to hypotension or arrhythmia. Patients should be closely monitored for resolution of organ dysfunction and for development of late-onset autoimmune thyroiditis and diabetes up to 6 months. Now we have your SJS as well and your TEN. So SJS and TEN are characterized by blisters and mucosal epidermal detachment in the absence of substantial dermal inflammation. It results from full thickness epidermal necrosis. No? The difference between SJS and TEN and SJS-TEN overlap relies on the total body surface area involvement. So in SJS right here, the total body surface area of blistering and eventual detachment is less than 10%, while in TEN, there is more than 10%. So yung in between SJS-TEN overlap. So that's around 10 to 20% of epidermal detachment. Patients with SJS-TEN initially presents with high-grade fever, sore throat, conjunctivitis, and an acute onset of painful, dusky, atypical target-like lesions. I wasn't able pala to put in a picture of a target lesion, no? Pero talagang mukha siyang bullseye. So a target lesion looks like bullseye. It's violaceous in nature. When you see one, you will know that there is something very different about that reaction. What is more distinct here in SJS-TEN is when they start to have epidermal detachment. These patients will look like burn patients. Their skin is very painful. They're very red. Talagang mukha silang nalapnos kung tawagin sa Tagalog. So there is like they look like burn victims, no? Other blistering eruptions with concomitant mucositis may be confused with SJS-TEN. For example, you have your erythema multiforme, which is associated with your herpes simplex virus and is characterized by painful mucosal erosions and target lesions, typically with an acral distribution and limited skin detachment. Ito pala here, the pictures of the skin here on the right side are target-like lesions. So parang ganyan, parang siyang may bullseye sa gitna. So mycoplasma and other respiratory infections in children cause a clinically distinct presentation with prominent mucositis and limited cutaneous involvement. The term reactive infectious mucocutaneous eruption or RIME, or RIME, has been proposed to help differentiate this clinical entity, which some believe may be the syndrome originally described by Steven Johnson. So prognosticating factors that are associated with poor prognosis include those that have associated intestinal and upper respiratory tract involvement, older age, and a greater extent of epidermal detachment. At least 10% of those with SJS and 30% of those with TEN die from the disease. Drugs that are most commonly implicated in SJS, TEN are your sulfonamides, allopurinol, anti-epileptics like your lamotrigine, phenytoin, carbamazepine, your oxycam NSAIDs, beta-lactams, and other antibiotics, and your nevirapine. Frozen section biopsy may aid in rapid diagnosis. At this time, there is no consensus on the most effective treatment for SJS or TEN. The best outcomes would really stem from early diagnosis, immediate discontinuation of the suspected drug, and meticulous supportive therapy in an intensive care or burn unit. When we have SJS or TEN patients, talagang all hands on board dito. We refer patients to surgery, to ENT, to OFTA, to an internist intensivist. Lahat talaga involved because the care is very meticulous. Imagine if this is like, yun nga, you treat them like burn patients. So the risk for infection is always there. You have to be able to balance well fluids as well as control and maintain an infection-free environment. Systemic glucocorticoids, the early administration of which IVIG, cyclosporin, or etanercept may improve disease outcomes, but randomized studies to evaluate the potential of these therapies are still lacking and are very difficult to perform. There is also a gap, your acute generalized exanthematous pustulosis, which is a rare reaction affecting 3 to 5 per million per year. Pero I think as the years go by, this one it becomes a little bit more common already. Kasi parang marami na rin kaming nakikitang ganon. It is thought to be secondary to medication exposure in more than 90% of cases. So patients typically present with diffuse erythema or erythroderma, as well as high spiking fevers and leukocytosis with neutrophilia. This is followed by the appearance of pinpoint pustules underlying the erythema after 1 to 2 days. The pustules are more pronounced in body fold areas. However, they may become generalized as well. It usually begins within 24 to 48 hours after drug exposure, although it may also occur as much as 1 to 2 weeks later. So this is what a GEP looks like. So there is a large area of erythema, and those pinpoint lesions, yung parang yellowish spots there, are your pustules. Based on its course and how the lesions of a GEP develop, the following differentials could be included. Again, your DIHS, which may be considered during the erythrodermic phase of your AGEP pag hindi pa lumalabas yung pustules. SJS, when the lesions become generalized and they coalesce and start to erode. In such cases, what will help you differentiate SJS from AGEP is the kind of erosions. Usually, pag AGEP, superficial lang. As compared to SJS, the full thickness talaga yung detachment and the mucosal involvement as well. And then you have your acute pustular psoriasis as well. Skin biopsies may help in differentiating SJS and acute pustular psoriasis from your AGEP. Commonly implicated drugs for AGEP include your beta-lactam antibiotics, your calcium channel blockers, macrolides, and other inciting agents like your radiocontrast medias and your dialysates. Patch testing with the responsible drug may often result in a localized pustular eruption. So in order to diagnose adverse drug reactions, a thorough history is essential. The history will guide you in the choice of diagnostic tests and whether it may be safe to reintroduce a medication or not. The most important component of the allergy history are the following. Number one, what are the drugs being taken? Go as specific as what is the name of the medication. Because trust me, a lot would really not know. Get a list of everything that they have, from new drugs being taken, their maintenance medications, their vitamins, their supplements, and even their herbal medications. Second, how long ago did the reaction occur? The time elapsed is very important. Is this an acute or an immediate type of reaction or a delayed type of reaction? Kaya nga siya yung start ng lecture ko because I want you to be able to remember these two types of reaction. Remember that the timing of the reaction provides us critical clues regarding potential mechanisms. Third, which systems were involved in the reaction? Was it just cutaneous or was it systemic? What were the characteristics? Is it just plain pantal? Diba? Usually pag sinasabi ng mga patients, if you come to the clinics, most Filipinos, whatever skin manifestation is, it's generally termed as pantal. But you cannot take it as is. You have to let them describe, what does the pantal look like? Was it small? Was it big? Was it flat? Was it elevated? Was it red? Was it skin colored? Was it violaceous or was it brown? Is it vesicular? Is it pustular? Is it a bullous? Right? These types of description of reactions will help you decide as to what type of hypersensitivity reaction or drug reaction you are dealing with. You are very lucky now because now everybody has cell phones, diba? Everybody takes pictures of whatever's wrong in their body, and it's very easy for patients to track them down. So make use of that. If they cannot describe it properly, ask them, may pictures po ba kayo pwedeng patingin? Diba? So, minsan doon natin nakukuha. Third, why was the medication prescribed in the first place? The indication is very important because symptoms of the underlying disease may be misattributed to the medication, such as, for example, a truncal rash during penicillin therapy for streptococcal infection, di ba? We know that streptococcal also has sandpaper rash. Baka mamaya iniisip nila yung sandpaper rash ng streptococci is a drug reaction, but it's actually part of the disease manifestation. Erythema multiforme, as I mentioned earlier, is partly a manifestation of Mycoplasma pneumoniae. So similarly, patients may also report an allergy to diphenhydramine, diba, anti-allergy, because it caused hives when it was taken for an underlying urticaria that simply did not respond to the antihistamine. Pero we know that urticaria has a waxing and waning pattern. So baka naman nagkataon lang, nung binigay yung diphenhydramine, time na niya ulit na mag-reappear. No? So you have to consider these things. Next, had the patient taken the same or a cross-reacting medication prior to the reaction? Many but not allergic Not all allergic reactions require a period of sensitization, typically during a course that was tolerated. Fourth, has the patient experienced symptoms similar in the absence of the drug? It is possible that a patient's primary condition was responsible for the symptoms or signs rather than a medication reaction. The most common case that I would encounter in my clinic are those with chronic idiopathic urticaria. Chronic idiopathic urticaria would usually manifest with wheals. No? So sometimes they feel like the wheals are actually related to the drug, pero chronic urticaria na nga siya. Kahit natanggalin mo na yung drug, months na siyang hindi nagtitake ng drug, meron pa ring lesion. So it's important to be able to identify these things as well. I had that patient like that. She was blaming glutathione for the drug reaction which she took February. I saw the patient parang June. As soon as nag-take kasi siya ng glutathione, parang a week after, she started to have wheals. So she discontinued glutathione, pero the wheals persisted up until she saw me ng June. So most likely, not anymore a drug reaction, right? And for management, I've already actually mentioned the management of the various diseases, but I would just like to emphasize that in managing drug reactions, the first question that will always that needs to be addressed will always be, should the drug be continued or discontinued? And you will be able to answer these questions. The decision will really depend on the following factors. First is the severity of the reaction. How severe is it? In cases of potentially fatal or life-threatening reactions, stopping all suspected medications should be immediately done. For example, SJS. In Stevens-Johnson syndrome, even if there is no other alternative drug for that medication, for example, it's a cancer patient and this chemotherapeutic drug is the only drug for that specific cancer, if the patient already develops SJS, do you really think it is still worth continuing the drug? Right? So the severity is very important. Second, the severity of the primary disease undergoing treatment. Again, for example, I'll use the same example in cancer patients. If, for example, the manifestation is urticaria or MP rash, and you know that naman cancer therapeutic drugs are kind of specific, di ba? They really have a particular drug of choice to particular carcinomas. So pag nag-react, usually I don't easily give up on the drug, lalo na if the reaction is mild, because usually the alternatives are not anymore as effective as the one that is being given. Or for example, in anti-TB medications, di ba? Ang daming nagre-react sa first-line anti-COX medications. But we know that the best drug for anti-TB is the first line. So minsan kung mild lang naman, willing yung pasyente, I still try. I still to continue giving the medication. Third, the degree of suspicion or causality. How strong or how likely is the drug being implicated, the actual trigger of the manifestation? Kasi kung hindi naman masyado, baka pwede pang ibigay. And then fourth, the feasibility of finding an alternative safer treatment. So sometimes if it's just a mild reaction, for example, urticaria, pero may readily available alternative naman that is equally efficacious, I usually recommend also shifting na lang the drug to be safer for the patient. Okay? Again, these are the options for treating drug reactions. So as mentioned earlier, withdrawal of the drug. I put this first because I think it's the safest option. If whenever it is possible, withdraw the drug. But mind you, again, the safest option may not always be the best option for patients. Second is what we call treating through the reaction. So the decision to treat through is usually just an option rather than a general rule. Most allergies would actually prefer not treating through because drug manifestations may change. Right? For example, you got the patient as an MP rash first, you continued the drug kasi sabi mo skin lang, tapos eventually nag-DIHS siya, nag-overlap siya to a DIHS, no? So, mag-change yung manifestation, pwedeng maging severe. So, this is usually not a very acceptable or amenable option for us, but sometimes we do. Sometimes, lalo na for example, nag-develop ng drug reaction 2 days before the completion of the antibiotic, minsan, sige na, tapusin na natin para lang, sayang eh. On the other hand, drugs that are not suspected are important for the patient, should also not be quickly withdrawn. This approach may permit judicious use of these agents in the future. Like for example, I had a patient before who was on multiple drugs kasi in heart failure. Pero one of the suspected drugs was warfarin and a beta blocker, which is very essential for the patient. So it's not very easy for me to just simply withdraw the drug. So may ganun din. Third is do an oral challenge. So you confirm the implicated drug. What we do here is we temporarily withdraw the drug when the lesions have when the lesions have resolved. We start reintroducing the drug and see if the drug was really actually the trigger. Usually, ito very useful to sa anti-COX medications, lalo na if the presentation is urticaria. Diba? So usually, pag may mga ganyang pasyente, we try to withhold the drug first, treat the urticaria. After the patient has been treated, the urticaria has been treated, we introduce the drug and see if the manifestations will recur. And lastly, desensitization. So desensitization is, the goal of desensitization is ultimately tolerance. So temporary tolerance. While the patient is taking the drug, the patient will not react to it. However, desensitization is only it's an option that is only should be only utilized for IgE-mediated reaction. So, type 1 lang siya. Pag ang hypersensitivity reaction mo is type 2, 3, or 4, DIHS yan, AGIP yan, SGS yan, desensitization will not work. It will only work in type 1 hypersensitivity reactions. And mind you, it is possible, still possible for patients to develop severe reactions during desensitization. So, we actually do this sensitization very cautiously as well. Okay? Because it involves a lot of risk. I think this is my last slide. Yeah. So, do you have any questions? If you have any questions, you may type them in the chat box or you may raise your hand to be acknowledged. I think there are no questions in the chat box and no one is raising their hand. Yeah. Okay. So if there are none, I thank you for joining me this morning and for attending the lecture. Have a good day, everyone.